Did you know that for over 70 years, the world's two biggest nuclear superpowers have officially been at peace, yet their soldiers have actually looked each other in the eye and pulled the trigger? We're told the Cold War never turned hot, but that is a lie, a massive historical fabrication. From secret dogfights in the stratospheric heights above the Sea of Japan to a literal high-stakes demolition derby between multi-billion-dollar warships in the Black Sea, the USA and Russia have traded blows more times than your history book wants to admit. And the craziest part? One of the most violent, one-sided massacres in modern military history didn't happen during the Cuban Missile Crisis or the 1950s. It happened just a few years ago in a dusty corner of the Middle East. Today, we are uncovering the hidden geography of the forbidden battlefields. Today, we're diving deep into the declassified danger zones. We always hear about proxy wars, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Korea, where these giants backed different sides, supplying the guns but staying out of the trenches. But today, we're looking at the moments the proxies stepped aside and the masters started swinging. We're talking about real-world geography, secret borders, and the terrifying moments where human error almost hit the nuclear reset button on civilization. Why does this matter? Because geography is destiny. Understanding where these invisible lines are drawn in the sand, the sea, and the sky tells us exactly where the next spark might fly. Let's travel back to 1952. The Korean Peninsula is a charred landscape. The world thinks the U.S. is fighting North Koreans and Chinese volunteers, but high above a region known as Mig Alley, a narrow stretch of sky along the Yalu River, American pilots were hearing something that made their blood run cold in their headsets. Russian. The Soviet Union had secretly deployed the elite 64th Fighter Aviation Corps. But here's the geographical catch. Their mission relied on total deniability. They wore Chinese uniforms with fake IDs, they flew planes painted with North Korean markings, and most importantly, they were strictly forbidden from flying over the ocean. Why? Because if a pilot was shot down and captured at sea, the secret was out, and WW3 would start before dinner. But on November 18, 1952, the geography of the war shifted in a heartbeat. A U.S. Navy pilot named Royce Williams was flying a routine combat air patrol 80 miles off the coast of Vladivostok, deep in the forbidden zone near Russian territory. Suddenly, 7 Soviet MiGs, the fastest jets of their era, streaked out of the clouds. Not Chinese, not North Korean, Soviet. Williams was alone in an F-9F Panther. His wingman's guns jammed immediately. It was 1 versus 7. In a frantic 35-minute dogfight that defied the laws of physics, Williams stayed on their tails. He didn't just survive, he shot down 4 Soviet jets. When he finally limped back to the USS Oriskany, his plane looked like Swiss cheese. It had 263 bullet holes and was missing chunks of the tail. If you guessed 50 years, you're right. The U.S. government was so terrified that admitting an American had killed 4 Russians would trigger a nuclear exchange that they classified the entire event. Williams was told to never speak of it, not to his fellow pilots, not to the press, not even to his own wife. The sky was a secret, but the ocean? The ocean is much harder to hide, especially when the U.S. Navy decided to take a shortcut through what the Russians considered their private swimming pool.
Fast forward to February 12, 1988. The Black Sea. The Cold War is supposedly thawing, but the water is freezing. The U.S. cruiser USS Yorktown and the destroyer USS Charon are sailing just 7 miles off the coast of the Crimean Peninsula. Now, the geography here is everything. The Soviets claimed these were their territorial waters, 12 miles out. The U.S., however, recognized a policy called innocent passage. Basically, international law says you can sail through someone's territorial waters as long as you aren't being provocative. But the Soviets? They saw a floating American fortress 7 miles from their top-secret naval bases, and they lost it. The Soviet commander, Admiral Chronopolo, didn't use missiles or torpedoes. That would be an act of war. Instead, he used his ship as a 3,000-ton battering ram. The Soviet frigate Bezavetny signaled, "Your ship is violating Soviet state borders." Then it accelerated. It literally climbed onto the deck of the Yorktown, tearing up guardrails, smashing through hull plating, and crushing Harpoon missile canisters like soda cans. Imagine 9,000 tons of American steel being slammed by 3,000 tons of Soviet Fury at 20 knots. This wasn't a navigational error, it was a high-stakes nautical game of chicken. Both crews stood at their stations, fingers on the triggers of their machine guns, waiting for someone to flinch. Did you know? The Black Sea is technically a marginal sea of the Atlantic Ocean, but it's almost entirely landlocked by 6 countries. The only way in or out is through the Bosporus Strait in Turkey, which is only about 750 meters wide at its narrowest point. This geography makes the Black Sea a massive strategic trap. If a war starts, whoever controls those tiny straits controls the fate of every ship in the sea. But while bumping ships is a tense standoff, what happens when the US military stops playing games and unleashes its full, terrifying power on a group of Russian fighters in the middle of a desert? This is the one they don't talk about in history class because it's too recent and too violent. February 7th, 2018. Deir ez-Zor Governorate, Syria. During the Syrian civil war, the US and Russia had a deconfliction line, the Euphrates River. It was a geographical pinky swear. US-backed forces stayed east of the river, Russian-backed forces stayed west. It was designed to prevent exactly what was about to happen. At 10 p.m., a massive force of 500 fighters, including a large contingent of the Wagner Group, Russian private mercenaries, crossed the river. They weren't just guys with AK-47s. They brought T-72 tanks, armored personnel carriers, and heavy artillery. They began a coordinated assault on a small Conoco gas plant held by just 40 U.S. Special Forces and their allies. For 3 agonizing hours, U.S. commanders in the Combined Air Operations Center were burning up the deconfliction phone to the Russian High Command. They asked, "Are these your guys? They're shooting at us." The Russians, perhaps trying to keep their hands clean, looked at the map and said, "Nope, not ours. We have no idea who those people are." That was a fatal mistake. Since the Russians officially disavowed them, the U.S. military was legally allowed to protect itself. And they didn't just protect, they unleashed what military analysts call the orchestra of destruction.
For the next 3 hours, the geography of that Syrian outpost was rewritten in fire. The AC-130s circled like vultures, raining down 105mm shells. The B-52s dropped tons of ordnance from 30,000 feet. The Apaches hunted individual tanks in the dark. By sunrise, the attacking force was decimated. Estimates suggest between 200 and 300 of the attackers were killed. It was the bloodiest, most direct clash between Russian and American personnel since the end of the Russian Civil War in 1922. These clashes show us that the world map isn't just a static image, it's a living, breathing, and sometimes bleeding danger zone. We cannot talk about geography and conflict without talking about the ultimate geographic scar, Berlin. October 1961, Checkpoint Charlie. This wasn't a secret dogfight or a desert skirmish. This was the heart of Europe. American M48 tanks and Soviet T-55s were literally 100 yards apart, separated only by a small wooden shack and a line on the pavement. Their barrels were leveled, shells were loaded, and the engines were idling. The geography here was a nightmare. A single city split down the middle by ideology, a wall being built in the dead of night. 2 global empires standing on a single street corner in Friedrichstadt. History tells us that a single nervous trigger finger from a 19-year-old soldier on either side would have triggered a chain reaction ending in a global nuclear exchange. For 16 hours, the world held its breath. Thankfully, JFK and Khrushchev used a back channel to agree on a synchronized withdrawal.
It was like a deadly slow-motion dance. One American tank moves back 5 yards, then a Soviet tank moves back 5 yards. They repeated this until the tension finally broke. From the sub-zero skies of the Sea of Japan to the sun-scorched oil fields of Syria, these two nations have been playing a terrifying game of "I'm not touching you" for nearly a century. We call it the Cold War, but as we've seen today, for the soldiers on the ground, it was often white hot. Now I want to hear from you. Looking at the world map today, where do you think the most dangerous geographic flashpoint is? Is it the disputed islands of the South China Sea, the narrow Suwalki Gap between Poland and Lithuania, or the Taiwan Strait? The world is full of these invisible lines. Where do you think the next one will be crossed? Let me know in the comments below. I'll be jumping into the heart of the most insightful and well-researched answers. Geography isn't just about memorizing capitals or studying climates. It's about the physical spaces where our future is decided. It's about the places where history is written in lead, steel, and courage. If you learned something surprising today, if you never knew about Royce Williams or the bumping incident, do me a huge favor and smash that like button. It really helps the YouTube algorithm find more geography enthusiasts like you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the hidden corners of our planet. Keep exploring, because the map always has more secrets to tell.